Greetings. Thank you for viewing this webinar. My name is Dr. Hilda Billups, and I currently serve as the chair of the Webinars Committee for TCUSPA, the Texas Association of College and University Student Personnel Administrators. You will notice we have changed the format for this webinar just a bit. This is one of our pre-recorded webinars. In these pre-recorded webinars, we seek to learn from experienced student affairs leaders. Our guest for today is Dr. Elizabeth Liz De La Rosa, Dean of Students at Lamar University. Allow me to introduce our facilitator for today's webinar. Dr. Anthony Edwards supports TCUSPA as the Director of Research and as a member of the Webinars Committee. Anthony serves as an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Technology at Tarleton State University. Anthony's teaching assignments include higher education leadership, higher education student services, higher education finance, higher education policy and politics, higher education history, and the comprehensive community college. Dr. Edwards previously served as director of Tarleton Online at Tarleton State University, a professor of biology at Panola College, senior vice president of talent at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, and science department chair at Granbury High School. Dr. Edwards also served as a secondary science teacher in the Fort Worth ISD and Huckabee ISD. Anthony's research agenda focuses on organizational change in higher education with respect to strategic planning, STEM education, higher education marketing, academic advising, and educational technology. Anthony has published manuscripts in the Journal of Higher Education Management and the HAPS Educator. In addition to chairing dissertation committees, Dr. Edwards supports student success as coordinator of the Higher Education Leadership concentration of the Master of Education program in Educational Administration. We're very excited to have Dr. Edwards serve as our facilitator for this workshop and are thankful to Dr. De La Rosa for her willingness to share. I will now turn our webinar over to Dr. Edwards.
Thank you so much, Dr. Billups. So with that, let me introduce Dr. De La Rosa. So Dr. De La Rosa serves as the Dean of Students at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, and she has over 20 years of experience in higher education leadership and brings with her a deep commitment to student development. So prior to joining Lamar University, Dr. De La Rosa held key roles at San Jacinto College, including 13 years as coordinator of orientation and campus tours. So she's had experience both at the university level and community college level. So in this role, she earned a strong reputation for her dedication to supporting student success and engagement. And prior to those roles, she spent nearly 8 years as the Dean of Student Life at Sul Ross State University. Engagement with students is central to her approach, as Dr. De La Rosa believes that it's vital to shaping and enriching campus experience. A major point in terms of her vision for the university is enhancing visibility and communication. Dr. De La Rosa earned a bachelor's degree in psychology in 1991 from Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and a master's degree in communication from Eastern New Mexico University in 1995, and a doctor of education in higher education leadership from the University of Houston Clear Lake in 2024. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. De La Rosa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited that you're joining us today. So I want to kind of get started with you telling us a little bit about your areas of responsibility.
All right. So just first off, I'm fairly new to Lamar, haven't even completed my first year, and it's been super exciting. So I oversee in my area, I'm also serving right now as the interim director for housing and residential living as we are transitioning in that area. So I've been hands-on in that area for the past couple of months. I also work with our director for student conduct and care services. I chair the LU Care Committee. And then we also, everything that happens with our Student Setzer Center is in my purview as well. So that's all our student organizations, our Cardinal Activities Board, programming, Week of Welcome, a variety of different pieces that land in there. And then I also touch on and work with our Student Government Association, as well as a little bit of our Greek life. So I've got
Wow.
a multitude of things happening. But yeah, right now my focus has been in housing, trying to get us ready for move-in this coming weekend.
Wow, that's a great breadth of responsibility there. In terms of your preparation to get there, what were some of your, we talked a little bit about some of your roles to get here, but maybe what were, talk about some of your previous jobs and maybe some of the lessons that you learned along the way.
Yeah, it has been a journey. That is for sure. I served, housing was my first professional role. Back in Nebraska, I served as a director of housing and campus activities at a community college at McCook, Nebraska. And so that was kind of the first gist. And then moved out to Sul Ross out in West Texas. When I started there, I landed as the director of residence life. And so I served in that capacity for about 3.5 years before I was promoted to the Dean of Student Life. So when you mix all of that together, I have a strong programming background and then also that housing experience. And then I think the last 13 years at San Jack, getting to work in the orientation capacity, which
Mm.
really exposed me to a lot of enrollment services and enrollment management issues. And so now bringing all of those experiences to the table really helps kind of take charge of what's happening here at Lamar so that we can bring all those pieces together, and work towards the common goal of student engagement and student success, and making all those pieces fit and helping everyone on the team understand what their role is in that
Mm.
entire process from entry to completion.
Right. And so I think you made an important distinction because I think being a student affairs leader, you're not only doing the programming, you're not just doing, the housing, the nuts and bolts of student affairs, but you're also leading and managing and coaching people. And so understanding how people fit and helping them grow and develop and, meet the needs of the department. But there's also a big leadership piece to that.
Absolutely. We are really fortunate. We have a young staff, right? And so it's really that it's providing that mentorship, that coaching capacity, teaching them the nuts and bolts of what their specific role is. But I think it's important for all of us, regardless of what level you're at, whether you're entry level, mid level, or senior level, to remember that we're just one piece of the big puzzle, right? And we all have to work together and we all have to collaborate because, there is no one area of an institution that can function siloed and by itself. And so that's been
Mhm.
really my charge in all these years is collaboration, breaking down those silos. I know, those of us in student affairs, we often feel like we're the redheaded stepchild and we don't get the acknowledgement and the credit that we deserve. But we also have to be able to be out there and supporting
Mhm.
our academic colleagues and our administration and showing them what we're doing and how we are a vital piece, to the puzzle. And so I think that that's the piece is I'm trying to help these young professionals to understand that it's like if you can get out into the entire campus community and engage and create those networks and those connections, then we're more likely to be seen and valued as a part of the institution.
Well, and you mentioned just that interaction with the academic affairs, but also just, I think we're also in a time where higher ed in general, the value is being questioned,
Yeah.
right? And is the value worth the cost? And sometimes when people think about college, they think about learning that happens in a classroom. And so, how do you, as a student affairs leader, get buy-in from, higher leadership and help convey the message of the value of student affairs?
And I think that's important. And we really talk a lot about this with our parents at family orientation. The research hasn't changed much, right? We know that, students are learning outside of the classroom, and the percentage rates are still in that 80 percentile, of what they learn and how they become, we're looking at that holistic student, and that's really what we're shooting for. And I think we have to be able to translate and articulate that to not only the parents who are paying, and the students who are paying for their experience, but our own administration as we continue to grow our individual institutions. And then of course here in Texas, all the things that we're challenged with, but we have to really focus in on that. It's like, we are giving you so much more than what you're learning in that classroom. And it's no different than our K-12 colleagues. Our teachers and administrators in K-12 are sharing so much with their students outside of just the content. And that's what we're doing here. Now, we have a whole division, right, in higher ed that handles that, student affairs. But we definitely have to partner with our academic colleagues, because it's not, you do this over there and then you come over here and you do this. Each of us as individuals, we are juggling pieces of our lives day in and day out on a constant. We don't get to compartmentalize that. And so that's what we need to be teaching our students, right? And that's where the value is. You get solid content and rigor, but at the same time, you are learning how to be an adult. You're learning how to be a professional. You're learning how to be a strong member of society and to reach those goals and aspirations that you set for yourself.
That's so important. I think just conveying the message about, we're developing a whole student and, building future professionals, I think is really important to convey that message. Now, if you think a little bit about, you've worked at a lot of different institutions. So you've worked at community colleges, you worked at, public universities. I think about Lamar in particular. I think sometimes when we think about student affairs, we think about traditional students. But I also know Lamar has a pretty large non-traditional student population. How does that impact the work of student affairs professionals?
Well, I think that it's definitely important. We do our pocket of students weighs a little heavier in the 24, 25-year-olds. We've got that. So, technically we would say that would be a non-traditional student. But if you've looked at today's 24 and 25-year-olds, they're really traditional. They're still some of them are still living at home. They're still trying to figure things out. And so we have to really be mindful of bridging that gap and keeping, when it comes to programming, let's just say programming, keeping it in a way that it's going to be something that's going to target everyone. Now, that doesn't mean that every event is going to hit every person. But we need to have a combination of things. And that's the idea, right? We want a buffet of events. We want a buffet of programming so the students can pick and choose what's going to work for them. Coming from the community college arena, working with non-traditional students is right up my alley, right? We understand that. A commuter, right? We're looking at our commuters. And so what are their needs? And sometimes it's as simple as a space. They just need a space on campus where they can sit down and either study between classes or grab a bite to eat. And we have to be thinking about that. We have our traditional students who are living in the residence halls. They have the ability to go back and go to their rooms and take a nap. Our commuter students don't have that. And so we really just have to get ourselves into that mindset of thinking that they are just as much a vital piece of the fabric of our institution, and look at what are the things that we can offer them. And what's the best way to find out? We ask. We talk to them. We ask them. We engage with them. And I think that's one of the beauties of what's happening here at Lamar, is that we actually talk to our students.
Wow, that's revolutionary. You actually ask students what they think and design programming around it. I mean, that's amazing. No, I say that no, just joking, but really that is awesome that you're incorporating their ideas. It's really important.
Well, I think we forget, right? We get so busy in the hustle and bustle, and we've got to have these standard operating procedures here. We've got this process there. And we just forget that we need to ask the end user, what is it that they really need? Because we might be totally off in left field, and all they're asking for is a space.
That's right. That is exactly right. Now, in terms, you said you've got a really young team, a new student professional team. What are some great pieces of advice that you give new leaders? They're jumping into new roles and trying to figure out how do they get started?
I try to remember back what it was like for me.
Mm.
You know, it was a long time ago, but trying to remember back, what were the things that were most intimidating to me? That may not be the truth for everyone. And we all know, you know, imposter syndrome and all of these things. But I try to tell them, it's like, I definitely am here and you can bounce ideas off of me. I will come to you, and I do. Um, I want them to be true to themselves. This is also a time as young professionals, they're trying to identify, not only is this the profession for them, you know, is this really the fit? You see as well as I do, we've got people questioning whether they've made the right choice being in this profession or staying in the profession. Should they even get out of higher ed? And my idea is like, you know, really look for that passion. What is it that drove you here to begin with? And to find a way every day to focus on that. If you can find just a little piece of that every day, then you can continue to thrive. And then I think the other piece is learn as much as you can, and don't narrow yourself, don't pigeonhole yourself into just one thing and one piece.
Right.
Student affairs is a broad has a broad array of responsibilities and things that happen. And I say, try to learn about as much of that as you possibly can, because like anything else, there might be a niche somewhere else that like, oh, I really like that. That's interesting. As if you choose to stay in the profession, as you raise the ranks, the more experiences you have, the more apt you are to land one of those mid-level or senior level positions, because now you have the capacity and the capital to bring to the table. You know what you've experienced it, right? Versus just like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. No, I actually lived that experience. I can tell you firsthand, this is how it worked for me, and this is how I went about it. And I think if we can take in as much of that with our young professionals, and I think it's important for us as leaders to provide those opportunities for our young professionals.
No, I think absolutely. And I think at TECUSPA, you know, we were really committed to helping develop our new and rising leaders. And so we try to get them involved, and, you know, whether it's the Mormon Fellows or whether it's, you know, our Graduate Student Institute and, you know, other opportunities, really try to get them involved so they can, you know, build the, I guess as my wife says, the, you know, reps and sets, you know, get that experience doing some things, so that, you know, sometimes it's outside of their day job, and then it allows them to get some experience they can use in their job. I think in your role, you know, I think sometimes people look at, you know, people in dean of students or the VP roles, and they see the glamorous pieces, and they see the, you know, like, oh, this is a person that has a big staff, and they, you know, do all of these interesting things, and they come in and give a speech at orientation. But they don't always see the challenging parts of the job. If you could describe maybe a challenge that you face as a leader and how you have tried to overcome that.
I think, you know, to be honest, I think it's competing priorities, you know, and being able to balance that and keep your team in a level playing field, right? And trying to provide, you know, I've got conduct, and those of us who deal with conduct, we know that dealing with students takes up so much of our time. And it's such a small piece of the job description, but it's a big piece of the day-to-day operation, right? But then you also have, you know, that doesn't limit those are the students that are coming to us that either are having problems, need help, and need assistance. We've got, you know, 90% of the others that are doing great, and we need to pay attention to them and make sure that we're making time for them. And so that's where I think those competing priorities, you really have to look at that. I think for me, that's been a challenge in the sense of really sitting down and focusing, and then trusting my team to handle the areas that they need to handle, so that I then can come in just as a support, and I'm not the one trying to take on everything, right? We've hired people to do these roles. I need to trust that they're handling that and they're meeting the mission and the objectives of the institution and of their roles. My goal then is just to support as needed. So if they need me, I can step in, but I can't possibly be everywhere all the time.
Correct.
And I think that's one of the biggest pieces in a role like this that we all kind of take in. And then we also have to be able to be flexible and agile, because you know as well as I do, when the call from the president's office comes, you've got to jump and take care of that, or the call from the
Right.
VPSA's office, wherever it may be. But we are definitely going in multiple directions. So I think, yes, you've got to hire smart. And trust that the people you've got in your roles, in your leadership roles, can handle the job.
Well, hiring, you know, because once you hire them, you know, they're yours to a certain extent, and so, you know, that is, you know, I've heard that, you know, you should hire slowly,
Yes.
so that you make the right decision. Because I think sometimes you're like, oh, I got to fill this position because I need someone, and you know, but you really got to be mindful about who you bring on. You've kind of hinted at this a little bit, but I'd like you to talk a little more about your leadership style and how it guides you.
Well, I don't think I have a set leadership style. It has evolved. I think for many of us, that's true, right? Your styles evolve through the years. You learn from your own mistakes. You learn from your own wins. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do that again. I think for me, it's a combination of, you know, being a servant leader and being available, but also leading. You know, I don't know that I can put a label on it, but it's situational. You know, some situations are going to warrant a little bit more of my attention and more hands-on. And then there's others that are like, okay, you've got this. I'm here if you need me, but go for it. You're doing great. And really supporting my team in that, and coaching and mentoring and validating. We all want validation. And so I try very hard to validate the team, and then definitely, you know, coach through things that maybe were challenges that we could do differently. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to ask my team to do something I'm not willing to do right beside them. And I am here to serve our students. I'm here to serve our teams, our faculty, our staff, anyone who is a member of this institution. That's who I'm here to serve. And I truly, truly believe in that. When I was an undergrad, I had a wonderful experience, and I had people help me as a student. And that's all I'm trying to do, is pay it forward. And the way I do that is by us serving our institution.
Well, I think servant leadership is never the wrong answer. Let's put it that way. So, so in terms of your experience, you know, you've worked, you know, in different roles in student affairs. So you've seen some of the things come, some of the things go. How do you see student affairs or student services changing in the future?
You know, things evolve, right? I think everything is cyclical. A lot of the things that we see in higher ed, or have seen in higher ed in the last 5 or 10 years, we saw probably 20 or 30 years ago when I was a student. We're just calling it something different now. I remember being a college student, and you had a very scripted degree plan. Then that kind of went by the wayside, and look, here we are again. We've got pathways, you know? And so for student affairs, I think it's a lot of the same thing. We are seeing now, when we talk to our students and we ask them, you know, how did you hear about this program? What do you want to see? What are they are asking to do things that I did as an undergrad. And I'm like, wow, you know, we just recently had wax hands on campus. And I'm like, they're still around? You know, I mean, it's crazy to me. So I do believe that we cycle through a lot of things. We need to remember that, yes, times have changed. We need to meet our students where they're at. We definitely have technology as a new component and a new experience for our students. But they also, because remember, a few years back, we had that crazy little thing called the pandemic, where we were all stuck in the house. Well, what happened then? We brought out the board games, we brought out family dinner, we did all those things where we were face to face with each other as a family unit. And I think our students are looking for that. Actually, they're telling us, we want to see posters, we want to see things where we can just hang out. We just want to hang out. And so I think that's where we're at. Where are we going? I think we'll just continue to cycle through those things. Definitely, we all say in student, why reinvent the wheel? But we've got to take out some of the old. And I think the change is we take some of the old and mix it with the new and create something even better. And so how do we incorporate our current technology, AI, all of these things into some of the things that we've done in the past? Making things available on social media, making things available through different social platforms for our students, I think is key. That's where they're at. They can be sitting in the same room, but they're still on their phones or on their iPads or something. And so we need to be there with them. And we need to try to stay ahead of the game. And so I think that's the other reason that it is important to hire younger professionals. They're kind of in tune with that. I'm about aging out. My daughter's 25 now, so she's not really cool anymore. She's not a great resource. So I need to go into my great nieces and nephews now to see what the younger population is doing. But I think that's the other piece for us as well as professionals. We need to stay in tune with what the younger generation is doing and what they're coming to campus with and what their wants are. It goes back to, we've got to talk to the student.
Well, again, going back to some foundational concepts, right? So I think it's important to, sometimes we overcomplicate things, and sometimes it's good to always go back to the basics.
Well, and I think so, and I it's that nothing I'm saying is profound. Nothing I'm saying is rocket science. It's basic. It's very basic, and that's how I operate. I'm a practitioner, but that is my thing. I am out there on the floor with the students, with our team. And that's what works. We know what works, right? Engaging, being present, being visible. I think I mentioned that is my ideal, is to be visible with students. I had a mentor years back. He was college president. He made a point to eat in the dining hall at least once a week. We can't lead from behind our desk, folks. We've got to be out there.
Well, and you mentioned you are a practitioner. However, you did go through the efforts of working on a master's degree and a doctoral degree.
Yeah.
The Doctor of Education does have a practitioner focus, but it does, I think, provide some opportunities to see the connection between theory and research and practice. How maybe did that experience help you in terms of the way that you approach problems in your job?
Let me go back and address that whole thing. So I turned 50 and I said, you know what I think would be a great thing? I'm going to go back to school. So it's never too late, folks. But it honed in on all the things that I was doing. Master's degree had prepared me for lots of theory, communication theory and whatnot. I was ready for that. But going back to do the doctorate, really kind of connected some of the dots. I've been doing research. I love research. I'm always digging and trying things, and I try to keep up with the reading as much as possible. But during that program, not only did it allow me the opportunity to look into very specific pockets of information, but I also was in a cohort that allowed me to work with other professionals from across the state to see and to do some benchmarking, as to what else is happening across Texas, both in K-12 and in higher ed. And I think that's the other piece that we need to remember, is that how our students are bridging from high school to college or a technical, program or whatnot, and really understanding that. And how do we make that viable for them? Again, we talked earlier about affordability, and I think that's important. We need our students to be able to come into our institutions, get through programs, be well-rounded and holistic approach, but I need them to be employable when they finish, right? So we've got to get that career readiness piece going. And then we also need to create those partnerships with industry and workforce in our areas so that we have that direct pathway for our students. And so the education piece really opened that up for me to be able to see what that, how to strategically manage that path, right? And then in student affairs, you know, if you're in career services, you think like that. But if you're in campus activities, you're not necessarily thinking about, oh, I
Right.
need to get them career ready. But it allowed me to kind of see how these pieces all come together and how we need to support each other. So it really was an opportunity to connect practice to theory, and then have the research to back it up. I did my research on the first generation population, which we all know is a big piece. And I looked at financial literacy, and I think that's a whole nother piece. They're right. And so I think bringing that to Lamar is really helpful because we do have a large percentage of first generation students. And we're able I'm able to use that information to know and understand the population that we're working with.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, you know, none of us have all the answers, right? And so I think being at a place where you know I can borrow from this or borrow from that and see how someone, you know, some other institution has tried to tackle this problem, I think is an important skill to have, because, you know, at the end of the day, we can't just sit on our hands and say, well, I don't know how we do this. So I think having that approach to, hey, I've looked at these different places and this is what they're doing. Let's try it and then we'll see how it works and document. And, you know, I think sometimes we make research this, you know, scary thing. And really you know, it's like, hey, I have an idea based on something I've read. Let's test it and see how it goes. And then we'll talk about it. Right. You know, so I think that's a really important observation that you've made. In terms of skills, you talked about skills for students. Let's transition a little bit for skills for student affairs leaders. What are maybe 3 skills you think student affairs leaders need to thrive in this current environment?
I think we need to be strong communicators, right? We need to be use our listening skills. We need to active listen to the folks that we're working with, whether it's our teams, our supervisors, our leaders, our students, our families. We need to really listen. I think sometimes we're so ahead of ourselves, and this is true for any field. I think we get so ahead of ourselves. We have our own agenda, our own idea, and we're missing the mark if we're not actually listening, because they may be telling us something completely different. And I think when you listen, and then you also need to be able to interpret data, right? I think that's really important. We need to be I believe in data-driven decision-making. And so you can only do that if you know how to interpret the data, but you have to collect the right data. So I think that's really important. That, again, that's something that I gained through my research classes at the doctoral level, is to really understand what is it you're trying to find out? How do we capture that data? And then how do we assess it? And then not only do we assess it, we need to put it into play. And I think that's definitely a skill that I would encourage any young professional to really look into. Take some research classes, take some data assessment classes, practice it, start small. It's just little stuff. You know, you could do a satisfaction survey and work with that. But then you really want to build up, because I think it's important to use data in everything that we're doing. So I'd say communication, data assessment, and then I don't know. There's just a lot of things, but I'd say learn to be flexible and adaptable. There are no 2 days that are alike in higher ed student affairs. So you've got to be able to roll with it. And don't get so caught up in it and take it too personally. I know those of us who have been doing this for a lot of times, this is kind of my passion. And it's hard not to take it personally, but we have to definitely work on that in our own emotional intelligence. And I think those are some things that we should be working and coaching, not only young professionals, but ourselves. We're always evolving. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. or before I got the doctorate, or 10 years ago when I started, or 20 years ago when I started my career. So we need to be able to do that our own assessment, our own data assessment and self-reflection.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of mentors, I mean, I think, you've probably had at least one or two people who, as you were going through the course of your career, who kind of helps you when you had questions or helps kind of steer you in the right direction. What's one of the best pieces of advice you received from a mentor?
One of my mentors, again, goes back to my first official president, college president. He was a great mentor, but he taught me to, to look at problems in a way that, it's not about pointing blame. It's not important to know who did what. It's important to identify the problem, figure out what happened, what went wrong, how do we fix it, how do we keep it from happening again. Don't harp on why or who, just address the problem and move forward, find a way to move forward. And I think I really try to practice that and to teach that and model that for my teams, for my family, for everyone. I think when you approach problem solving, if you get caught up in the blame game, we're never going to resolve any issues. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned from him. Like you said, I have had multiple mentors through the years. Students first, no matter what, students first. I had another leader who became a mentor. And then there's also those leaders that you learn things of what not to do, right? And so really paying attention to that as well, and watching, because you've got mentors, or you should have mentors in different capacities of your world, of your life. And even if they are a mentor, they make mistakes too. They're human too, right? And I think that's important to watch as well and to learn. And so I did learn, from some of those mistakes as well. And so, but I think problem solving was probably the biggest lesson that I took on very early on as to how to approach that. Because I think sometimes we do, especially when we're younger, we're really worried about being right. And that's not always the most important thing.
Right. I think, but good leaders give you at least some room to fail. There's obviously some things you can't fail on, but figuring out where are the opportunities to fail that can be learning experiences, that, you can give people those opportunities, can be important. Now, in terms of your own growth and development, are there any books or podcasts or things that stick out to you in terms of your, I guess you draw inspiration from?
Yes and no. I'll be totally honest with everyone. I am not reading right now. I am buried. But I think,
well, we just got through with orientation season, so I can understand that. Really.
Yeah, orientations, and like I said, I'm doing housing, so move in. I'm buried right now. But I think typically I really lean towards just a lot of I like to look at the different stuff that's happening out in the leadership world. What are the updates? What are the changes? Again, you've heard me talking for the past 30, 40 minutes. I'm very basic. I stick to the foundation, but we always need those refreshers, right? So I will go into YouTube and watch something, or I'll open up a podcast, and it's probably something I heard 10, 15 years ago, but it's that refresher, it's that reminder. And then, I really enjoy, I just shared a video, an old 1970s video with my team. I don't know if you guys know it, but it was on customer service. Give them the pickle on Farrell's Diner or whatnot. It is old. If you look it up, they're wearing 1970s clothes, but it gets so to the point. It's just simple, right? It's simple. I'm keeping it simple. And so I look at a lot of that stuff. Personally, I like to just dig into, I go into my spiritual faith, and really go into that, tap into that. I think that's what keeps me grounded. and keeps me from, wanting to pull my hair out every day. But leadership, Simon Sinek is one of my go-tos. And some of the others, but I don't have anything profound right now that I'm listening to or watching or reading. I've got a list of books to read, but just haven't gotten there right now.
Completely understandable. Well, I've enjoyed having this conversation. I know some of the things that I took from this discussion, importance of collaboration and breaking down silos, highlight the learning that happens outside the classroom, focusing on the holistic student experience, hiring smart and trusting your people, never stop learning, being an active listener, having the ability to collect and interpret data, being adaptable, identifying problems and finding solutions, avoiding the blame game, students first, no matter what. And if you haven't read anything by Simon Sinek, take advantage of that. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much, Dr. De La Rosa. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. And thank you so much. And we appreciate you being part of this pre-recorded webinar for TECUSPA.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope everyone has a great start of the new year.
I'm sure they will. Thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Billups.
Thank you for viewing this webinar. We would also like to thank Dr. De La Rosa again for sharing with us. Please check our YouTube channel for more webinars like this one, as well as our other webinar types. If you missed a webinar this year, we invite you to watch the recording. If you're interested in presenting, serving as a panelist for a future webinar Wednesday, or participating in a pre-recorded webinar, please consider completing the proposal form. The link will be included in the description for this video. Finally, the TECUSPA membership year runs from January to December. If you're not yet a member of TECUSPA, we encourage you to join us. Thank you and have a great day.